If there's one thing we've learned about business and life, it's that people are the X factor. They constantly surprise us, both in amazing ways and not so much. We're Ben and Syya, and welcome to the Gnaw on This Business Bytes podcast. This show is all about real life things we all deal with every day, how they relate to business, and how to make some sense out of our daily chaos. Welcome to the show. And welcome back to another episode of Gnaw on This Business Bytes. I'm Ben and this is Syya. And this week we're going to talk about workplace boundaries without the backlash. You know, we need to be able to create situations where we can create our boundaries, when we can say, hey, listen, I just don't have the bandwidth for that right now. I can't do this. I can't do the other thing. No, without all of a sudden looking at somebody that's always negative, somebody who's not a team player, somebody who's not a go-getter, somebody that's not thinking of the organization above themselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, there are ways of doing this, and there are ways of sitting there going, you know what? I'm a team player. I'm a go-getter. I want the next position. But however, we need to talk about it in these terms and under these circumstances, because it's got to be something that's not only good for me, but it's got to be something that's good for we. And it's all about positioning. So Syya, let's gnaw on this.
Oh, I know we've talked about setting boundaries or saying no before. So the interesting thing is that it's comes hand in hand, right? Because it's not necessarily a no per se. It's just I'm putting those that bowling alley gutter ball thingy so you don't gutter ball it all the time. You're just putting like bumpers into things so you kind of keep you focused and whatnot. I think setting boundaries is probably one of the hardest skills to develop as an adult. I think there is opportunity for people as they develop in their careers for leadership to identify and help create and help support those boundaries that are set for the team. I think all of those types of gestures is a great goodwill gesture for the company. So therefore you actually start breeding a good company culture where it's almost like everyone now takes pride in the fact that everyone knows what the lanes are. What I think that's in the happy unicorn way of describing boundaries, and healthy boundaries is set. That's the Syya happy definition. The pragmatic Syya is coming out. Okay, here we go. Ready?
There we go.
I gave you some unicorn. Let me give you some realities, which is boundaries have to be understood as an internal mechanism of which you have for yourself. It may or may not be a boundary that other people's will necessarily follow. So how do you react knowing that there might be others who don't give a two poops about your boundaries, right? So I think this discussion on boundaries is almost like a how do you react versus how do you create your boundary? Because
absolutely,
heaven knows I know how to. You want me to create some boundaries? I'm good at creating boundaries. Like I just go poop poop. I just shut everyone down. You're out. Deuces. The question is okay, how do you react to other people's boundaries? And I think that's the most critical part, because I think that shows more emotional EQ.
Yeah.
Emotional intelligence to recognize you're reacting to someone else's based on the information they're feeding you. They're telling you what their boundaries are. So then it's up to you to decide how you want to navigate it with honoring your boundaries. You're not giving away your boundaries. You're just, how do I navigate my bumpers and your bumpers? It's almost like, oh, what's that car?
The bumper cars. Yes.
So our boundaries are our bumper cars, and we're still having fun. Some intentionally running into each other.
Yes.
And others just having fun driving around in circles and trying to spin out and try to drift, which we never. You would drift as someone kind of like, what's that called? The car pit maneuver.
Impact. Yeah. No, it's interesting because I'm a big believer of yes and or yes however.
Yes.
I'm a big believer of yes, absolutely we can do that. You bet. Now, what are we willing to give up in order to make that happen?
100.
And it's amazing to do this. Before I complete that, said I got a story that's just sitting in the back of my mind. It was right about the time my wife and I were married. I was working for Kinkos corporate at the time, and we had this huge job that was running multiple nights. And because they run the big jobs at night, and before I left, I talked to the night crew supervisor. I let them know what it is. I gave them instructions, this, that, there. Well, 3 nights in a row, the operator calls me at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning with some dumb question. Just like if all they had to do was read the instructions and they would have the answer. On the third night, my wife picks up the phone and goes, "He is not a brain surgeon. Figure it out for yourself," and hung up on him.
I love your
It
wife.
it led to some very serious conversations over the next week with the team about boundaries, about systems, about process, about figuring stuff out. The thing is, you got in at 10 o'clock at night. The first thing you need to do is you need to read the docket and make sure you understand everything. If you don't, you can call Ben up to 11. Like if it's seriously wrong, if something is, a major flag, you can call him up to 11. Somebody would have had to have died before you call me at 2:30 in the morning again.
Yeah.
And these are the answers: yes, and or yes, however. Yes, you can call me. However, here are the stipulations that go with it. Yes, I'm willing to take over that project. However, do we have the do we have the executive buy-in in this project? Do we have the budget? Is the timeline reasonable? Do we have the technical team ready to support this? Are the salespeople ready to move forward with this project, or are they going to be tied up in another project? Yes, however, yes, and you need to be able to set yourself up for success while you're setting people up for success. And if all of a sudden that adding that one program is going to be the piece of straw that breaks the camel's back, you need to say, yes, absolutely, we can do this. What are the projects we can put on hold or we can give to somebody else in order for me to be able to focus on this?
Yeah.
And I think that's where, excuse me, we create our boundaries. And that's doing it in a professional way. It's just saying, look, you can have the moon, but you can't have the stars to go with it. If you want the moon, the stars, and the universe to collide all at the same time, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
There's only so much an individual person or an individual team can do. What's your priorities? And I understand these are your priorities, but the vice president told me that these are his priorities. Can you go talk to him directly and just find out which one is the priority? I'll go whichever way you guys want, but you guys figure out amongst the two of you which project is the bigger priority at the moment.
You know what's funny about that is it's interesting you mentioned because when you don't have your own boundaries set, right, within yourself, it's amazing how I hate the word contagious it is, like how you spread your lack of knowing your own limitations.
Mhm.
Then you start thrusting it upon others. And that's where I think a lot of workaholics have a negative impact on a team because
Hmm.
whereas a team that might have been like cohesive, maybe communicate very clearly about, hey, here's what we realistically as humans can do and
Yeah,
function. And I that's a struggle because there's a lot of people who are work insecure. And I think
yeah.
I know I 100 my entire career as a sales rep, I was work insecure because I pretty much assumed I had a 90-day contract, even though I was salaried. I pretty much freaking assumed the first day of the quarter was the first day of me walking towards my exit. And you never know until the next, whoop, I made it, whoops, I made it. And I think that
Glengarry
love,
Glen Ross. Do you know that reference?
oh yeah,
Glengarry Glen.
oh yeah. Oh man, yeah, oh man. I believe every person that wants to go into sales, I don't care. Glenn Ross, I think is 42 years old now. That movie.
Easily.
It or not 40, maybe 40. Wait, what year is this?
It's about 40 years old.
35, 40. Don't
Yeah.
35, 30, 30, 30. It's 30. Well, 30.
No, it's longer than 30. Doesn't
Is
matter.
Glengarry in 80s or 90s? I thought it was
It's
90s.
80s. It's an 80s
Is
movie.
it for sure 80s?
For sure 80s movie.
At any rate, you know what I was about to say?
Yeah,
It feels like yesterday. Yeah, no, let's not
exactly.
talk about that. But yeah, I think. you know, again, how you react to boundaries being set for yourself and how you react to other people's, I think is going to be that critical key of ensuring that you yourself are keeping yourself whole. And I
Hmm.
love the way you say it. Yes, and right. And yes, you know,
However,
however, however, I also
however,
think it's your team has to consciously say that as a group. It can't just be you. You know what I'm saying? Like it's got to be something where as a leader you facilitate that everyone should be comfortable saying yes and or yes however
exactly.
versus just one person. But at the same time, I think we had a previous episode, little things count in large amounts, right? So it
Yes.
can be you start the trend within your own team to say yes and or yes, well, however, right? I keep saying why in my head.
But it's
Why?
but it's also
Why you want
having
me?
it's also having leadership that backs you up.
Yes.
It's also having leadership that doesn't go off and promise the moon to a customer without checking with you first, and then puts you on the hook for making that happen. And I look at sales teams, I look at ops teams, I look at marketing teams. Everybody is sitting there going, he says, yeah, we can make that work. We can make that happen. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't want to tick off a customer. Yeah, 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 we'll just happen. And then somebody's left holding the bag, and it's usually not the person who made the promise to actually physically make that thing happen. And we would be far better off as organizations if leadership said, you know what, I think we can do that. Let me check with the team, find out what's possible and what we're capable of, and make sure we can meet that deadline because I don't want to disappoint you. And let me get back to you later this afternoon.
Mm.
Does that work? And that's setting up expectations. That's expectations and that's accountability because all of a sudden your team, you say you're involving your team and say, look, here's the problem. This is what they'd like. It says, okay, well, we could do it this way or this way. This way's going to take 10,000 hours. This way's going to take 5,000 hours. We can do the $5,000 one, but here are the problems with doing it the 5,000 hour way. Here's what they get for the 10,000 hour way. Here's where things. Here's what the outcomes are going to be. You decide with the client. We'll go either way, but we can't give you the 10,000 hour project in 5,000 hours. It's just not possible to do. So then you go back to the customer and say, look, here are two options. Here's what we can do. Here's what we can do for you by December 31st. Does that work for you? Does that give you enough to be able that we can move the rest of it into Q1 of the next year? And that's client management, that's project management, that's people management. And I think that we need to sit there and look at it and say, instead of just saying yes and then running around with our heads
Head
cut
cut
off,
off, yeah.
trying to figure out how to get stuff done, we sit there and say, do we have for me, it was the printers on board. Do we have the print? Do we have the printers on board? Do we have the paper people on board? Do we have the envelope manufacturers on board? Do we have the graphic designers on board? Do we have the mail house on board? Do we have the logistics in place? We've got about 8 or 10 different people that all have to be able to say yes before we can make a deadline. And for me to say yes and then push those 10 people to be able to pull off a miracle, within a strict budget, how often are they going to do it before they say no?
You're totally reminding me of like, I'm so like, I left corporate sir for a reason. Why are you re-traumatizing me with these conversations? It's funny. I left corporate back in 2017 and I've
Right.
befriended my clients since then. And it was like, we were always like friendly. My clients and I, we just talk and whatever. Because, I've never had a persona of a salesperson. How you doing? I couldn't do that, right?
Yeah.
Although I just did, so, but I didn't do it well, clearly. Anyway, one of the really interesting feedbacks I got from one conversation, so this is anecdotal, I'm not saying it's, stereotypical, but we were just chatting, and I said, you know what? What makes, I was like one of those random thought questions. And I was just asking, I said, we always had a good working relationship. You always told me when my company was screwing up and bad. I mean, there were days when like they're like, dude, I might have to fire your company. Like
Right.
bad type conversations. And then we also had really great conversations on things. And I just said, hey, can I ask you truthfully, like, could I have performed better as a sales rep? What was it? What was it about our relationship that we're sitting here 5 years on
Hmm.
after I've left the company and we're still talking and we're still friendly and all that stuff, right? And their answer I thought was really enlightening, which was A, you were real, you're authentic, you we knew if we knew we overstepped. They're like,
Hmm.
we're like children, we're always gonna be pushing you guys for whatever we can, but when we pushed it, you stopped. Like you
Right.
literally, and they're like, and they're like, you don't have a good poker face. I'm like, thank you, thank you. It's called RBF, thank you. But they what they said, which resonates with me, which is whether the situation was good or bad, we were always consistent with each other's communications to say, they're mad at us, and here's the list. And then I
Hmm.
would reply back with the lists, and I would try to address each one. And quite frankly, some of them were unreasonable. And I remember pushing back saying, hey, look, you're telling us we're failing XYZ here. That's not even our project. That's not even our responsibility. How are we failing this? Oh, well, you guys are like like supporting of this. I go, but we were not part of that installation. So if that particular project is failing, why am I responsible? We weren't even part of it, right? So I go, and I used to say, don't don't be unfair to us.
Right.
We're being fair to you, and then vice versa. And we would have those conversations. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I just like I think with what we're talking about here is if we are authentic to who we are in those communications and we set those boundaries with each other to say, hey, you're mad at the situation, don't be mad. That was the other thing. When we were mad at the situation and the voices would be raised, okay, I was
Right.
never an angel in that. Voices would get raised. We always understood the situation was why we're raising. It wasn't because we were disrespecting each other. It was we're frustrated with the situation. And
Hmm.
then and then when we'd look at each other, I remember one specific one. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to help you here. Come back. And it was boo, de-escalate. And we always made that boundary very clear, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
anyway, it was just something that just reminded me of we set boundaries and you have to set your boundaries, especially for tense situations, because it brings it back into focus again. So I know I ran long,
You
but
know what? I think that's a great place to leave it because I think that you've summarized it enough to sit there and say we need to have open and honest conversations. We need to trust each other. We need to rely on each other. And we need to let people know what's gone right, what hasn't gone right, and how we can fix it. So
yes,
let's leave
yes.
it there. I'm Ben,
I'm Syya.
and we'll see you soon.
Hey, hey, hey. Thanks for listening to another episode of Gnaw on This Business Bites. If you liked what you heard, we most humbly ask that you like, share, and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to communicate more effectively within your organization, contact Ben at yourbrandmarketing.com or me at brilliantbeammedia.com. We can help you build your community, brand awareness, and personality through digital content and podcasting. We cannot wait to hear from you. So see you next week for another episode of Gnaw on This Business Bites.